The thunderous sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance as Katherine Vance stood frozen in disbelief, watching the last wisps of dust settle where her wagon and everything she owned in this world had been just minutes before. The Rustlers had come from nowhere, striking like vipers while she had stopped to rest her horses by a small creek outside of Silver Creek, Wyoming territory. It was 1878, and Katherine had traveled alone since burying her father 3 weeks prior. At 24, she had inherited his small cattle business and was transporting what remained of their belongings to start anew in Montana. Now, as the setting sun painted the vast Wyoming landscape in hues of amber and gold, she found herself utterly alone with nothing but the clothes on her back and her father's pocket watch tucked safely in her skirt pocket. Tears threatened, but Katherine refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't bring back her wagon, her supplies, or the small strongbox containing the money from selling their Texas homestead. Instead, she gathered her skirts and started walking toward town, her boots raising small puffs of dust with each determined step. Silver Creek appeared on the horizon just as twilight descended. The small frontier town consisted of a main street lined with wooden buildings, a saloon, general store, blacksmith, and a modest hotel. Light spilled from windows, and the distant sound of a piano drifted from the saloon. Katherine pushed through the batwing doors of the Silver Spur Saloon, ignoring the surprised looks from the men inside. A woman alone in a saloon was unusual enough, but one with dust-covered clothing and a fierce expression was downright peculiar. "I need help," she announced to the room at large. "Rustlers took my wagon about 5 miles east of town. Everything I own was in it." The piano fell silent. Men shifted uncomfortably, none meeting her eyes. "That'd be the Blackwater gang," said an older man nursing a whiskey at the bar. "They've been hitting travelers heading north. Sheriff's been after them for months." "And where is the sheriff now?" Katherine demanded. "Tracking another gang up near Buffalo Creek," the bartender offered. "Won't be back for days." "So no one's going to help me." Katherine couldn't keep the bitter edge from her voice. The saloon fell uncomfortably silent until a deep voice spoke from the corner. "I'll help you, madam." All heads turned toward a tall figure rising from a corner table. The man stepped into the lamplight, revealing a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something striking about his features' strong jaw covered in stubble, straight nose, and eyes the color of a summer sky. "Ethan Quinn," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "I know those rustlers. I know where they camp." Katherine studied him carefully. His clothes were worn but clean, his gun belt well maintained but not flashy. Everything about him suggested competence without bravado. "Why would you help me, Mr. Quinn?" she asked warily. A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Because it's the right thing to do, miss. Katherine Vance, most call me Kate." "Well, Miss Vance, I suggest you get some rest at the hotel. I'll leave at first light." Katherine shook her head firmly. "No, Mr. Quinn, if you're going after my wagon, I'm coming with you." Murmurs rippled through the saloon. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not wise. These men are dangerous." "So am I when crossed," Katherine responded. "Everything I have in this world is in that wagon. I won't sit in a hotel room while my future hangs in the balance." For a long moment, they locked eyes in silent battle of wills. Finally, Ethan nodded once. "Be ready to ride at dawn. I'll bring an extra horse." Katherine found lodging for the night thanks to the generosity of the hotel owner's wife, who offered her a small room and a clean dress after hearing her story. As she lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, Katherine wondered about the cowboy who had offered his help. There had been something in his eyes, a shadow of past pain that resonated with her own losses. True to his word, Ethan Quinn was waiting outside the hotel as the first light of dawn streaked the eastern sky. He sat atop a powerful chestnut gelding and held the reins of a sturdy paint mare. "Can you ride astride?" he asked without preamble. Katherine nodded. "Since I was 7, good, we have ground to cover." Ethan handed her the reins and watched as she mounted smoothly, arranging her borrowed dress as best she could. "The Blackwater gang moves fast, but they're predictable," Ethan explained as they rode out of town. They have a hideout in the foothills about 20 miles north. They'll take your wagon there, strip it of valuables, then likely abandon it." "How do you know so much about them?" Katherine asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Let's just say our paths have crossed before." They rode in silence for several miles, the vast Wyoming landscape stretching endlessly around them. Katherine found herself studying her companion when he wasn't looking. There was a fluid grace to his movements, an ease in the saddle that spoke of a lifetime on horseback. "You're not just a cowboy, are you?" she finally asked. Ethan glanced at her, surprise briefly crossing his features. "What makes you say that?" "The way you sit your horse, the way you scan the horizon. You've had training." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was a scout for the Army for 7 years. Before that, I rode with a Texas Ranger. And now I raise horses on a small spread outside Silver Creek." By midday, they had reached the foothills. Ethan led them off the main trail and into a narrow pass between rocky outcroppings. "We'll approach from the west," he said quietly. "They won't expect that." "What exactly is your plan, Mr. Quinn?" Katherine asked, suddenly realizing she had placed her trust and possibly her life in the hands of a man she barely knew. "First, I'll scout their camp. Then, depending on how many men they have and where they've put your wagon, we'll make a decision." He looked at her directly. "And it's Ethan, Miss Vance." "Then you must call me Kate," she replied. They left the horses hidden in a small grove and proceeded on foot. Ethan moved with surprising silence for such a large man, and Katherine did her best to follow suit. They crouched behind a large boulder overlooking a small valley where several tents were pitched alongside a creek. "There," Ethan whispered, pointing. Katherine's heart leaped when she spotted her wagon at the edge of the camp. 6 men moved around the site, 2 of them unloading her possessions while the others tended to horses or sat drinking by a small fire. "I count 6 men," Ethan murmured. "More than I expected. This complicates things." "I recognize that big man," Katherine whispered. "He was the leader, the one who held a gun on me while the others took the wagon." Ethan's expression hardened. "That's Reed Dawson, mean as a rattlesnake and twice as deadly." "What do we do now?" "We wait until nightfall. Most of them will drink themselves to sleep, then I'll go in." "I'm coming with you," Katherine insisted. Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, you'll wait with the horses. I work better alone." "But this isn't negotiable, Kate. These men won't hesitate to kill you or worse." The intensity in his blue eyes silenced her protests. They retreated to where they'd left the horses and made a small, sheltered camp in a stand of pines. As they shared a sparse meal of jerky and hardtack from Ethan's saddlebags, Katherine studied him with newfound curiosity. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked. "The truth this time." Ethan was silent so long she thought he might not answer. "Reed Dawson and his gang raided my ranch last year," he finally said, his voice low. "They took my best breeding stock and shot my ranch hand when he tried to stop them. Benjamin had been with me since I started my spread. He was like a father to me." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. "The sheriff couldn't prove it was them. Not enough evidence," he said. Ethan's hand tightened around his canteen. "I've been watching them since, waiting for a chance. And I'm your excuse to go after them." His eyes met hers. "You needed help, I needed a reason. Seems fair." As darkness fell, the temperature dropped quickly. Katherine wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to shiver. Without a word, Ethan removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. "I can't take your coat," she protested. "I run warm," he said simply. "Always have." The unexpected kindness touched her deeply. "Thank you, Ethan." Hours later, with the moon high overhead, Ethan rose and checked his revolver. "Wait 2 hours," he instructed. "If I'm not back by then, take my horse and ride for Silver Creek." "I'm not leaving you," Katherine said firmly. Ethan's expression softened momentarily. "You're a stubborn woman, Kate Vance, so I've been told." With a final nod, he disappeared into the darkness. Katherine strained her ears but couldn't hear his movements. The minutes crawled by like hours as she waited, every sense alert for any sign of trouble. Nearly an hour had passed when she heard the first shout from the direction of the camp. A gunshot split the night, followed by another. Unable to bear the waiting any longer, Katherine rose and moved toward the sound. She crept to their earlier vantage point and peered down at the camp. In the moonlight, she could make out several figures rushing about in confusion. A tent was ablaze, providing erratic illumination. She spotted Ethan by her wagon, exchanging gunfire with two men while attempting to harness her horses to the wagon. Without conscious thought, Katherine hurried down the slope toward the camp. She skirted the main area, keeping to the shadows, and approached the wagon from the opposite side. Ethan saw her and his eyes widened in anger and alarm. "I told you to stay put," he hissed as she reached him. "You're welcome," she retorted, quickly finishing the harness work he'd begun. A bullet splintered the wood near Katherine's head. Ethan pushed her down and returned fire, dropping one of their attackers. The remaining rustlers were regrouping, using the cover of the burning tent to advance. "Get in," Ethan ordered, helping her into the wagon seat. He handed her the reins and swung up beside her, firing another shot to keep the rustlers at bay. "Go," he shouted. Katherine snapped the reins and the horses lunged forward. The wagon wheels found the rutted path leading from the camp, and they were racing into the darkness with shouts and gunfire fading behind them. "Keep going," Ethan said tensely, reloading his revolver. "They'll follow." They drove hard for several miles before Ethan directed her to turn off the trail and follow a shallow creek for some distance. The water would hide their tracks and make pursuit more difficult. Finally, as false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they found a sheltered hollow to rest the exhausted horses. Katherine slumped against the wagon's seat, the adrenaline draining from her body. "Did you get everything?" "Everything that matters," Ethan confirmed. "Your strongbox is under the seat. I grabbed whatever personal items I could find." "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You helped back there," he said, his expression softening. "We make a good team." As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Katherine truly looked at the man beside her. In the growing light, she could see a gash on his forearm where a bullet had grazed him. "You're hurt," she said, reaching for his arm. "It's nothing," he dismissed, but allowed her to examine the wound. Katherine tore a strip from her petticoat and gently wrapped his arm. As she worked, she was acutely aware of his eyes on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "Why were you traveling alone?" he asked quietly. "My father died 3 weeks ago," she answered, securing the makeshift bandage. "We had a small cattle operation in Texas, but the drought hit us hard. Pa got sick, and by the time he passed, there was nothing left but debt. I sold everything and was heading to Montana. My mother's brother has a ranch there." "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you," she met his eyes. "What about your family?" "Don't have much. Parents died of fever when I was 16. Joined the army after that, then the Rangers. Been on my own most of my life." The simple statement contained volumes of loneliness that resonated with Katherine's own sense of isolation. "We should move on," Ethan said, straightening. "It's not safe to stay in one place too long." They continued north, taking a circuitous route that Ethan believed would throw off any pursuit. By late afternoon, they reached a small homestead nestled in a protected valley. A modest cabin sat beside a barn and corral where several fine horses grazed. "This is my place," Ethan explained as they approached. "We'll be safe here." The simplicity of the homestead belied the care that had gone into building it. Everything was well maintained, from the straight fence lines to the neat woodpile stacked against the cabin wall. "It's lovely," Katherine said sincerely. "It's not much, but it's mine," Ethan replied, a note of pride in his voice as he helped her down from the wagon. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a worn but clean sofa facing it. A small kitchen area occupied one corner and a curtain partially concealed the sleeping area. "You can take the bed," Ethan said. "I'll sleep out here." "I can't put you out of your bed," Katherine protested. "It's no trouble, you've been through enough." That evening, after a simple but satisfying meal of venison stew, they sat before the fire. Katherine had found her trunk of clothing intact in the wagon and had changed into a clean dress. Ethan had washed and put on a fresh shirt, his damp hair curling slightly at his neck. "How long have you lived here?" Katherine asked, relaxing into the comfort of the sofa. 5 years. Started with just 2 breeding mares and a stallion. Now I have 15 horses with 5 foals expected in the spring. Pride warmed his voice. Another few years and I'll have one of the finest horse breeding operations in the territory. It sounds wonderful, Katherine said, a hint of wistfulness in her tone, to build something lasting like that. What will you do in Montana? Ethan asked. Katherine sighed. I don't really know. My uncle has offered me a place to stay, but I don't want to be a burden. I have the money from selling our Texas property. Perhaps I'll open a dress shop or a millinery. Is that what you want to do? The directness of his question caught her off guard. I've never really thought about what I want. It's always been about survival. Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know something about that. They fell into comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. Katherine found herself stealing glances at him, noticing how the firelight played across his features, softening them. You should get some rest, Ethan eventually said. Tomorrow we can decide what's next. Katherine rose, suddenly reluctant to end their conversation. Thank you again, Ethan. For everything. He looked up at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. Good night, Kate. In the small bed behind the curtain, Katherine lay awake, listening to Ethan move quietly around the cabin. The events of the past 2 days swirled in her mind: the terror of the robbery, the determination of the pursuit, and the unexpected connection she felt with the taciturn cowboy who had come to her aid. She had never believed in instant connections or the romantic notions found in dime novels. Her practical nature had always asserted that true relationships were built over time, with shared experiences and proven reliability. Yet in just 2 days, Ethan Quinn had shown her more about character and quiet strength than she had learned in 24 years. Morning brought clear skies and a sense of decision. Over breakfast, Katherine broached the subject that had kept her awake much of the night. I need to thank you properly for what you've done, she began. Ethan shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I disagree. You risked your life to recover my wagon and possessions. At the very least, I owe you compensation for your time and trouble. A flash of hurt crossed his face before his expression became carefully neutral. I didn't help you for money, Kate. I know that, she said quickly. But I can't simply accept such a significant favor without offering something in return. Ethan was silent for a moment, then said quietly, having company has been payment enough. It gets lonely out here. The simple admission touched Katherine deeply. Then perhaps I could stay a little while, to help around the place, until I decide what to do next. His eyes met hers, surprise and something else warming their blue depths. I'd like that, if you're sure, I'm sure. The days that followed fell into an easy rhythm. Katherine took over the household tasks, bringing order to the bachelor's quarters and preparing meals that far exceeded Ethan's usual fare. In turn, he showed her the horses, teaching her about breeding lines and the qualities he sought to develop in his stock. They worked side by side mending fences, tending to a foal with a slight limp, and preserving vegetables from Ethan's small garden for the coming winter. With each passing day, Katherine found herself less eager to continue her journey to Montana and more invested in the quiet life they were building together. A week after her arrival, they rode out to check on a pregnant mare that had wandered to the far edge of Ethan's property. The day was gloriously warm for early autumn, with wildflowers still dotting the meadows and butterflies dancing over the grass. They found the mare grazing contentedly in a sheltered valley. After ensuring she was well, they dismounted by a clear stream to rest and water their horses. Spreading a blanket on the soft grass, they shared the lunch Katherine had packed. I've been thinking, Ethan said as they sat watching clouds drift across the vast Wyoming sky. Silver Creek's growing. There's talk of the railroad coming through next year. That would be good for your horse business, Katherine observed. It would, he agreed. And the town could use a proper dress shop. Most folks have to order from catalogs or travel to Cheyenne for anything special. Katherine looked at him sharply, wondering if he had somehow read her thoughts. In recent days, she had been considering exactly that possibility. Are you suggesting I should stay in Silver Creek instead of going to Montana? She asked carefully. Ethan met her eyes directly. I'm suggesting you might have a place here if you wanted it. The implication hung in the air between them. Catherine's heart raced as she considered his words and the emotion behind them. "And where exactly would this place be?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan moved closer, his hand finding hers on the blanket. "Wherever you want it to be, Kate, but I was hoping it might be with me." The directness of his statement took her breath away. This was not a flowery declaration or practiced courtship, but something far more meaningful, an honest offer from a man who spoke with actions more than words. "We've known each other such a short time," she said, though her fingers intertwined with his of their own accord. "Some things don't need time," Ethan replied. "Some things you just know." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "I've been alone most of my life. Never minded it much until you came along. Now the thought of going back to that solitude seems unbearable." Catherine's free hand moved to his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I feel it too," she admitted. "This connection between us, it defies explanation." Ethan leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Katherine closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened with shared longing. His arms encircled her, strong and secure, as her hands slid into his hair. When they finally parted, both breathless, Katherine rested her forehead against his. "I don't want to go to Montana," she whispered. "Then stay," he murmured against her lips. "Stay with me, Kate." They returned to the cabin as the sun began its descent, their horses walking close together, their hands occasionally meeting between them. That evening, as they sat before the fire, plans began to take shape. "The town's having a harvest dance next Saturday," Ethan mentioned. "Would you accompany me?" Katherine smiled, happiness bubbling through her. "I would be honored. It might cause some talk," he warned. "You staying here unchaperoned." "Let them talk," she said firmly. "We know the truth of things." The night of the dance arrived crisp and clear, with stars shining brightly over Silver Creek. Katherine wore her best dress, a deep blue that matched Ethan's eyes. She had altered it slightly in the past days, updating the style and adding delicate embroidery at the neckline. Ethan's appreciation was evident in his gaze as she emerged from behind the curtain. "You're beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The town hall was decorated with autumn leaves and harvest bounty. Lanterns cast a warm glow over the proceedings as a small band played lively tunes. Their entrance caused a stir, with curious glances and whispered conversations following them. The sheriff, recently returned, approached them early in the evening. "Quinn," he nodded, then tipped his hat to Katherine. "Madam, I heard about your trouble with the Blackwater gang. Mr. Quinn was kind enough to help recover my wagon," Katherine replied. "So I heard. Also heard there was quite a commotion at their camp. 2 men wounded, one with a bullet in his shoulder." The sheriff's eyes were sharp. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Quinn?" "Self-defense, Sheriff," Ethan said calmly. "They shot first." The sheriff held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, it seems Reed Dawson and what's left of his gang have moved on, crossed into Montana territory according to my sources. Good riddance to them." As the sheriff moved away, Ethan led Katherine to the dance floor. "May I have this dance, Miss Vance?" "You may indeed, Mr. Quinn." They moved together with surprising grace, Ethan proving to be a far more accomplished dancer than his cowboy appearance might suggest. As they waltzed, Katherine felt the remaining pieces of her heart, the ones that had been holding back surrender, completely to the man whose arms held her so tenderly. "I love you," she said softly, the words coming naturally, without hesitation. Ethan's step faltered momentarily before he pulled her closer. "I love you too, Kate, more than I thought possible." The weeks that followed were filled with work and planning. Katherine began renovating a small storefront in town for her dress shop, using part of her savings to order fabrics and notions from Chicago. Ethan expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and enlarging the kitchen. They were building a future, stone by stone, dream by dream. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Ethan took her hand. "I have something to ask you," he said, a rare nervousness in his voice. "Yes," Katherine turned to him, her heart suddenly racing. From his pocket, he withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "This was my mother's," he explained. My father gave it to her when they homesteaded in Colorado. It's not fancy, it's perfect, Katherine breathed. Ethan slid from the chair to one knee before her. Katherine Vance, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I can't offer you luxury or ease, but I promise to love you faithfully for all my days. Tears of joy filled Katherine's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Ethan, yes, with all my heart. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms, sealing their promise with a kiss that spoke of all the tomorrows awaiting them. They married 2 weeks later in the small church in Silver Creek, with the entire town turning out for the celebration. Katherine wore a gown of ivory satin she had sewn herself, with the pearl ring gleaming on her finger. Ethan, in a new suit, looked at her with such adoration that several of the town's women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. As Ethan's lips met hers, Katherine marveled at how much her life had changed in just 2 months. From desolation at losing everything she owned to finding everything she had ever wanted: a home, a purpose, and a love that had arrived unexpectedly in her darkest hour. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Katherine's dress shop flourished, especially after the railroad came through as predicted. Ethan's horse breeding operation grew in reputation, with buyers coming from as far as California for his stock. The cabin expanded again to welcome their first child, a daughter with Katherine's spirit and Ethan's blue eyes, followed 2 years later by a son with his father's quiet strength. On the 5th anniversary of the day they met, Ethan took Katherine riding to the valley where they had shared their first kiss. A picnic was spread on the same spot, though now their children played nearby, chasing butterflies through the wildflowers. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? Katherine asked as she leaned against her husband's shoulder. If those rustlers hadn't stolen my wagon, sometimes, Ethan admitted, his arm tightening around her. But then I remember something my father used to say. He believed that some souls are meant to find each other, no matter what stands in their way. Katherine smiled, watching their children laugh in the sunshine. I think he was right, she said softly. Some things are simply meant to be. As the afternoon sun bathed the valley in golden light, Katherine Vance Quinn knew with absolute certainty that everything she had lost had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the cowboy, who had ridden back at dawn with everything they had taken from her, including, most unexpectedly, her heart.